Welcome to my Blue Moon Deep Dive Special. A blue moon is when we get a repetition of a full moon twice in the same month in the same zodiac sign. If you recall, when we had the summer solstice, the sun moved into the sign of Cancer, but then on the 21st of June, universal, we had the first of the Capricorn full moons. Now, as the sun prepares to leave the sign of Cancer, we've got the second Capricorn full moon, or buck moon, but this is a blue moon. It doesn't have any astrological significance in itself, but this particular full moon is so powerful, incredibly powerful, and I can't wait to share all about it. I'm going to tell you about what a full moon is, what a Capricorn full moon represents, but what makes this one so unique. I'm going to share the event chart from a solar perspective we can all relate to, but also from a Placidus perspective, which has an ascendant at 2 degrees in Libra. I'm going to share all the key locations and timings, and then I'll go through each of the 12 signs, so please stay with me from Aries through to Pisces, and give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next 2 weeks, whether you're relating in terms of your ascendant, sun, or the moon. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. It's great to have your company. If you're new here, please feel very welcome to share any thoughts. This is very much a community. If you're a returning visitor, all your views and interactions are truly appreciated. If you'd like to sub to the channel, we have found that 50% of people who enjoy my videos regularly are not subscribers. Please help the channel to grow if that's you by clicking that sub button and also the bell notification symbol. If you'd like to have a one-to-one with me, please check out my testimonials below. I'm a consultant astrologer. It's a major part of what I do. I don't alter these. As they come in, I share them word for word. Check out how other people have experienced working with me. Also, if you'd like to get your free written horoscope fired to your device each morning, I provide an overview each day of the most dominating astrological influence to give us the big picture, but also you can enjoy your zodiac forecast. If you're Patreon, thank you for your support. I will upload a blue moon factoid for you, and you can become a patron from $3 a month. Finally, if you'd like to ascend above zodiac horoscopes and embrace the power of natal astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data, of time, date and place, or date and place. If you don't know your time, I have developed a very unique solar format which is very effective. I'll produce for you your life roadmap report, which will give you searing insights in the patterns that are played out in your life so far, but also how you can work with those more intimately future forwards. And for 30% off, you will also get your 12 months transits, the moving planets in the sky interacting with your totally unique blueprint. Please see below for more. If you know your tropical astrology, why not check out my draconic package instead? Also 30% off, more information below. So this Capricorn blue moon or buck moon occurs at 29 degrees and 8 minutes, which of course is the anaretic degree, said to be a fated degree in astrology. But what makes this particularly interesting is the sextile that's forged with the dreamy drifting Neptune, but in a very uplifting, potentially very spiritual way. But also Pluto is very, very close to the position of this particular full moon. So that adds the potential for transformation. But they're both angling to Mars, which is moved on the 20th of July into the sign of Gemini. And Mars and Pluto are in a 120 degree trine, which is very enabling, in these 2 zodiac signs for the first time in 220 years. What does all this tell us? Well, a full moon is when the sun and the moon are in opposition. The moon in the sign of Capricorn is in its detriment, it's its weakest position. The sign of Capricorn is about physical culmination, so it's very much to do with goals, ambitions, practical structures, property, corporate affair, big business, big government. And in terms of our personal life, it's where we want to see the outcome of all our hard work. So we want to see some security. So the moon in Capricorn is very much aligned to security. So people who have the moon in Capricorn take security very seriously. But the sun, on the opposite side of the heavens, come into the end of its journey through Cancer. It's very much about protectiveness, nurture, the very things the moon is all about, because of course the moon rules the sign of Cancer. So that's what makes this a very interesting double event, simply because the moon and the sun are opposing one another. So with a new moon, which in fact is a dark moon because very few people can see it, we are seeing the start of a process. What we get with a full moon is a conflict, when the thrust of the sun is conflicted with the emotive and receptive energies of the moon. So it's much harder to integrate their energies. So I will go through each of the 12 zodiac signs, as I mentioned, to give you a flavour of what you can expect. But in terms of all of us, I feel that a Capricorn full moon is about work-life balance. If we're too caught up and too attached to physical, practical and worldly attainment, but we're ignoring how we feel, that's not such a great thing. So the classic example of that could be someone who's got a really good job, it's well paid, lots of perks, perhaps a pension, health cover, a really nice car, and that funds a good practical and material lifestyle, but they're miserable because they don't like the people, they don't like the location, and they don't feel invested in it from an emotional viewpoint. So we're all being asked to check out how much we've got in check, that balance between where we need to protect our home and emotional and family life, because we do need to interact with the world and be realistic about that. It's just a fact. We can't just squirrel ourselves away in and be rather hermit-like, which of course the crab of Cancer can like to do at times. We have to have that interaction. So that can be the testing point. But equally, it could be a push or a time when something we have been working on, perhaps with the Cancer new moon, to try to manifest something where we can see tangible progress, which does then feed into the narrative of Cancer, which is about security, stability, and that obviously is lovely. Now, as I mentioned, this particular unique, very, very unique full moon is linking beautifully to Neptune and also very powerfully to Pluto and across to Mars. But on the screen now, I'm showing the event chart from a solar perspective. And you can see the moon, therefore, is in house 10. But the interesting thing, sun, house 4. But we also have a square between Mercury and Uranus, which is going to go on through to the middle of the week following this event. And that can make us a bit more impulsive about money, and also perhaps inclined to be a little bit risk-taking. Certainly wanting to live in the moment, not necessarily wanting to analyse things too much. But we also have a fantastic link between Venus and Jupiter, which has just peaked today. And that particular alliance between the two planets of fortune, Jupiter the greater benefit and Venus the lesser benefit, with Venus in the proud sign of Leo, which likes a bit of class, and Jupiter in the quick-witted Gemini, which Mars has just moved into, suggests that there can be some serendipity that comes from this event, some kind of reset in our situation. So if you have been feeling really affected by that Mars conjunction with Uranus, which was very unsettling, and of course, with the conjunction with Algol, which in itself, that fixed star, is a very dark energy. But we've also had since then both Mars and Uranus linking very positively to the Sun. And on this event as well, the position of Mars is linking in a fantastic sextile to the Sun. So we're priming up things ready for the Sun to move on the 22nd into the sign it rules of Leo. So you're seeing the big picture here, but what about the event chart from a Placidus viewpoint? Because based on Greenwich and universal time, not because I'm in the United Kingdom, but because of the prime meridian, and I feel that therefore we can all reflect to this. We see that the ascendant, as I mentioned before, is 2 degrees in Libra, but the moon, ironically, goes into house 4 and the sun into house 10. How intriguing is that? So in terms of the proper astrology, rather than relating to this event just from a zodiac viewpoint, we can see that the protectiveness that's important with the moon is still there. The moon in the 4th house is very conscious of its immediate environment. And of course, both the sun in Cancer and the moon in Capricorn are in cardinal signs, which is about power. So there's a bit of a battle for power here, but we're being reminded that however much we set goals and ambitions to succeed, if things don't feel right, or it feels scary, or we're in environments that we don't like, or we're seeing big business having a big impact on water, for example, and of course Capricorn can be about the corporate world, and water is a hot topic all over the world because of microplastics in the seas, and of course we've got a lot of cruise ships, which a lot of people enjoy, but a lot of pollution comes from them. A lot of travel around the world, the oceans are being poisoned, a lot of heavy metals being absorbed by big fish particularly, but in the United Kingdom the water situation is a disgrace because of the desire for profit. So that kind of stuff is really going to come into the public domain even more than it has been recently over the next couple of weeks. But in terms of our own personal situation, I feel that one of the guiding principles of astrology is really to get in touch with our intuition, because intuition has become unfashionable. And we see all these scientific statements, and then we hear scientists now know, because their previous stance was actually a theory. It wasn't a fact, but they soon attack astrology based on the fact that they see it as being fanciful. But astrology is a combination of some maths, but it's also very much to do with instinct. And so I feel that this event is asking us all to be guided by that instinct. Know it's okay to find security. It's okay to earn good money as long as it feels right. How we use it and redistribute it, if it's caring and thoughtful and we're aware of our environment, which Cancer rules, why not? So in terms of the exact timing of this event on the screen now, I'm sharing, it is on the same day. This isn't always the case, but it's on the 21st of July, the world over. Now, someone did flag, quite rightly, that I've been sharing London, in fact, using the Greenwich time. So they were absolutely right. So I've adjusted this by an hour. So you've got London based on London and Greenwich based on the world chart for universal time. Thank you for that. That was a good spot. Now, please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs to tell you what's going to happen for you over the next 2 weeks. So, Aries, you're in that very lucky position of your ruler having moved into a really exciting part of your chart, the 3rd house. It's been making its way through a part of your situation to do with money, your values, your self-worth for the previous 6 weeks. But it's linked to Pluto, as I mentioned before, so incredibly rare. First time, 220 years. And of course, the sign of Gemini and the sign of Aquarius are the communicator signs. It's air. So if you've got ideas that are important to you and ideas that could improve your situation in terms of your home comforts or your personal security or your family stability, do be open to pursuing them, because that combination between Jupiter and Venus on this event, which is so fortunate, and the instinct that Neptune's asking you to embrace, because Remember, you are a very instinctive sign, whereas other zodiac signs will hum and ha and do their research, and I'm not saying you don't do that as well, but ultimately, if something excites you, you go. And I think that's a marvellous quality that's very often overlooked about Aries people. So things are going to speed up for you. But if it has felt over the last month that you have been dealing with a lot of issues to do with your home or your family or emotional matters, things are about to blossom out in a way which is going to be really pleasing for you. So the next 4 weeks are going to be much more sociable, much more interactive. You're going to be much more energized, and you could even find yourself wanting to become much more physically active too. So stepping up your exercise routine, whether it's walking the dog, whether it's on your bike, going for a swim, whatever is your particular fancy, you could find your enthusiasm for that is much higher. But equally, it may be that something that has got to do with your work could reach a point where you may have a big decision to make. So if you haven't been enjoying the environment in a professional situation, you're being given the celestial tools to make a big shift. And you can do that if you really choose to do so. The next 4 weeks can be absolutely terrifically exciting, but it may mean therefore that there needs to be a transition period which could be uncomfortable. But if you are working in a business where you don't feel seen, heard, appreciated, acknowledged, celebrated, or the job bores you, this is a great chance to be much more on the front foot and demonstrate those wonderful skills of instinct, which are a big part of you, but also the passion, the determination, and the courage to make a change. Taurus, there may have been something that you started to develop in your thinking or an idea a month ago, and someone may have proved to be a little bit resistant to what you wanted to work and embrace. And perhaps it meant that some kind of big change needed to occur. This could have been someone very close to you. Or maybe it's been around a friendship, or maybe it's been around your own personal situation in terms of a long-term plan. And if you have felt or did feel about 4 weeks ago a bit confused, a bit discouraged, and a bit unsure, and then the electricity of last week's conjunction between Mars and Uranus has perhaps fired you up in some ways, but also left you feeling a little bit exhausted, because maybe making that move is going to take some kind of step outside something you're more familiar with. So I feel that the fact that this particular event combines with Pluto, which is in the most visible part of your situation, is a big clue about what this full moon's about, because essentially it's about a conversation. The conversation can be with yourself, or it could be with someone you're close to, or it could be an advisor, a business coach. It could be someone you want some money from. It could be your bank. But the critical thing is that Pluto, right at the top of your chart, is about power. So when you're conversing about your idea or what you want to achieve, if you did seem a little bit woolly a month ago, that may have seen someone a bit unsure. But if you're really clear about what you want to present and share, you've got a much greater chance of gaining their involvement, but also their support. But as I mentioned, it could be that that conversation's going on with yourself, because particularly if you are a later born Taurus person, so therefore in the last 10 degrees, the last decan of your sign, which is ruled by the steady eddy of the zodiac Saturn, you're not necessarily someone who's going to throw everything up that has given you a sense of continuity. So doing the research and really thinking about things carefully has been important, and you've been very wise to do that. But don't forget that Mars has just left your sign, and Mars over the last 6 weeks has slowly but surely been prompting and prodding and provoking you, particularly in that conjunction with Uranus, to take that step perhaps into the unknown. Because if you do, with Mars moving into your second house, linking to Pluto in the 10th, if you do submit that proposal, that application, you have that interview, do you know, you have such an amazing opportunity to increase your income, but also to increase your sense of self-worth. Particularly if you break free the 9th house, where the full moon is, very much about freedom and independence, from something that isn't working for you. And that could be just a structure or a lifestyle approach that you've been a bit too attached to. But of course the sun does move just after this event into the part of your situation which is to do with where you live, how you live there and whom, and also around your relationship to your emotions, your sense of security and stability. So if you're pushing out to do something daring, you're going to want to make sure that it still works for you in terms of that innate part of your nature, because your sign is where the moon is exalted. So after the sign of Cancer, you are a person who appreciates the benefits of the moon second. So therefore, you're being asked to do two things at the same time, which is a little bit complex. But whereas Neptune may have really confused and baffled you a month ago, Neptune's now, in some very subtle ways, giving you little clues, little hints and prods about what you can do. But most of all, it's about listening to your instinct, discussing those ideas, but having belief in your plan and your ambition, but not letting a need for stability and security pulverize that passion too much. So Gemini, a Capricorn full moon for you is very much about where you're most invested. That can be emotionally, it can be financially, it can be around things you share, it can be very much to do with the psychological dimension, and also some things that need to alter and transform in our lives. So the 8th house can be a time when things make way. The 9th house, where Pluto is, which is the influence, the planet, which is very much about those transformations, suggests your need to transform something at the moment can be incredibly potent. But over the last 6 weeks, with Mars making its way through a very delicate part of your situation, your confidence, your self-belief may not have been at its best. You may even have felt under par, even physically, not 100%. But now, with Mars having moved into your sign, linking almost perfectly with the Sun in its last degree of Cancer, but then to the position of the Sun once it moves into Leo, and also to that position of Pluto for the first time in 220 years, you can go from a period where there's been a lot of uncertainty about values, because the Sun in Cancer is about how you value yourself, but it is also about your personal values, but it's also about your everyday income, whereas the position of the Moon is to do with longer term finances. It can be to do with investments, pensions, shares, anything to do with legacies and inheritances and contingencies. But that area is a very tender area that many of us don't want to look at, because ultimately the 8th house is about where life can, in some ways, regenerate itself. So it's a phoenix point, if you like, but sometimes in that process, something has to make way. So if you're attached to something, whether it's a relationship, a possession, a job, particularly around the money side of it, or a romantic involvement, particularly if it's a very sexual involvement, but you're not feeling very in trim and in balance, what this particular full moon is urging you to do is to cut the cord on what's keeping you almost addicted to whatever has been rather challenging to deal with over the last 4 weeks. Because when Neptune applied to the first of these two Capricorn full moons, it was nearly, as it still is, on your 11th house cusp, which is about your future hopes, it's about your friendships, it's about the more idealistic part of your nature. But it's also in the 10th house, which is your place in the world. And because we all do obviously need to earn a living or have an income to maintain our place in the world, sometimes we stick with something because we think it's better than twisting. But if ever there was a full moon which was encouraging you to break free from something that you feel almost possesses your soul, and that may sound very dramatic language, but if you really do feel trapped, held in, almost an addiction to something that isn't really making you very happy at all, whether it's a lifestyle choice, whether it's your diet, whether it's too much screen time, whether it's watching telly too much, whether it's a job that bores the pants off of you, you're being given the most unique opportunity probably of your whole life, with Mars having moved into your sign and in that angle with Pluto on this particular full moon, and with Mars and Jupiter, the planet of fortune, in your sign, which only happens once every 12 years, linking to the other planet of fortune, Venus. If ever there was a time in your whole life, this is an amazing drum roll. I am a Rolling Stones fan, so I'm channeling Charlie Watts, also a Gemini, and Ronnie Wood on the guitar. This is a heck of a drum roll to release yourself and rediscover what makes you so special, which is the sparkle of communication, and being very to the point with your ideas and being a trendsetter, being very exciting and amusing and entertaining to be around. You've got it all to go for, Gemini, over this next 2 weeks, but also over the next month too. So Cancer, the second of these two full moons, is a challenge to you insofar as when the sun returns to our sign, as it did for you with the summer solstice, and ushered in cardinal quadrant 2, so in Western tropical astrology, that's the second 13-week slot of the year, and that's all about manifesting everything you stand for. That's the nurture, that's the caring, that's the protectiveness, that's the love of being secure and safe and being in an environment that feels comforting, but also that you're a terrific manager of resources, absolutely superb. But with this particular second full moon, you're being tested about some of the things that you've been putting a lot of energy into, because not everybody probably agrees or has agreed over the last month with some of your strategies. But that's because you're doing or have been doing something a lot more radical. And the reason for that is that Mars has joined up with Uranus, of course, last week, but has been making its way through your 11th house over the last 6 weeks, which is very long term influence. Is very much to do with our future, can be to do with our alliances, our connections, our network, our friendships, our higher purpose, but that connection to Uranus may have been shaking up a connection that you've had, which has had a degree of safety first. Because really what the sun has been asking you to do is manifest your individual power. As much as you can be a carer, it's important not to lose your identity. If you felt your identity as being in some way compromised, the last 6 weeks has been a fabulous opportunity for you to realign, redirect where you're heading. And it could be that somebody feels threatened or challenged by that. But you're now reaching a juncture where you may have some big questions to ask of yourself. And that's because Mars has moved into house 12, which can arouse a much greater consciousness of things that we thought we dealt with from the past that are still working around in the depths of our being, deep in our subconscious. But also, it could be that somebody who hasn't been particularly pleased with what you've been trying to do could become a little bit more active in that opposition, particularly because this particular full moon is so close to Pluto, and therefore the sun in your sign is opposite Pluto essentially. So if there is somebody in your world is not appreciating the extra verve and drive that you've been investing in some perhaps more radical way than they've been used to. It could be very unsettling, but you may feel that this is a fight for something that you in the past have put to one side in order to be a carer, which is a very incredibly important role. But if people have become too connected to that part of your being in a way which is limiting your potential to manifest the individual part of your nature, that's the big challenge on this event. And of course, the other thing that can happen is with the sun moving into Leo on the 22nd, something you've been working on can start to show even more promise, because I feel that Venus has been helping you, and you could, with something that you've been researching quietly or taking soundings on or discreetly talking to someone behind the scenes, you could have a fabulous piece of financial news very, very shortly. But someone could be jealous. So watch out for that over the next couple of weeks. Just being really truthful for you. But it's also a fantastic opportunity for you to start seeing the fruition of that more daring direction you started to manifest 6 weeks ago. So Leo, over the course of these 2 full moons, I don't necessarily think it's been all easy, because on one hand, Mars has been pushing you to raise your profile, be more dynamic, be much more goal orientated, and really be assertive about your ambitions. But that connection with Uranus may have seen some tension, particularly around your professional situation, or perhaps someone just felt that you were being perhaps a little bit too self-assured. But concurrent to this, the sun was in the part of your situation that's to do with withdrawing a little bit, but that's in some ways been competing with Venus and Mercury in your sign, which have been giving you the push to manifest a new, more dynamic and glamorous version of yourself. But I feel the 2 full moons, and this one can as well in some ways, have been calling out to some vulnerabilities, because the sun in the 12th house can be where we feel a bit insecure. It can be about anxieties. The more unspoken part of life, which can therefore be psychological, our subconscious, and at the same time, the moon in Capricorn, both of them, have been asking you to grapple with practicalities. And if your physical health has felt a little bit under par, it wouldn't be an entire surprise. But the wonderful news, Leo, is that with Mars having made its way into your 11th house, which is much lighter, it's going to be there for 6 weeks, linking with Pluto in your sector of relating. If there are dynamic people that you really enjoy networking with, those alliances can go from strength to strength. And of course, the sun is going to move into your sign. But there could still be some opposition because of the opposition with Pluto. So as much as this particular full moon does offer a lot of opportunities, not least the fact that Venus in your sign is in such a delicious link with Jupiter. So someone could be really drawn to you through a social event. It could be a romantic connection. Maybe it's just fun to mix and mingle with people you're really fond of. You're definitely going to emerge from this full moon and want to interact and engage with people more. So if you have felt that it's been a bit of a conflict between, on one side, your professional situation has given you opportunities, you have felt like in some ways recasting your image or approach, but there's been another part of you that's felt a bit underpowered and a bit lacking in the total self-belief. But have that total self-belief now, because something really fortunate can come through for you really quite surprisingly quickly over the next few weeks. So Virgo, your modus operandi is very much about being very reliable, applied, thoughtful, helpful to others, providing services, not being servile, spotting things through your grasp of detail, being meticulous in your approach, being able to sift through. You know, you're one of the zodiac's key members in terms of gluing life together. But one of the problems with that particular approach for you in recent months is you've been provoked more and more around the concept of change. And that old saying of change being as good as a rest is easy for our friends and family to tell us. It's not always easy if we feel quite adhered to a particular life pattern. And if you have liked your life to be pretty metronomic, then this particular event is really like a crossroads for you, I feel, because the first full moon that occurred a month ago was pretty confusing around relationships, and particularly around relationships in your social or friendship group, or even around your love life. So it may have felt quite hazy. But if you're feeling that you are stifled, or you're giving away too much of your individual power, or you can't be as adventurous and free as you would like, whether it's around your work, whether it's around a relationship, friendships or interests, or those routines that you're rather adhered to, the fact that Mars has moved into a very powerful part of your chart, really giving you a lot of extra confidence, really, to take that restlessness that's been so strong of late, to do something with it. So I think some Virgos can seriously look at a new job over the next few weeks. The complexity is the Sun moves into a very tender area, which means it's joining up initially with your ruler Mercury, but also Venus, and that could see you want to ruminate very deeply just when Mars is saying, look, go for it. Let people know how talented you are, if there's someone you're really attracted to. But another part of your nature, especially if things have felt very unsettled of late, or there's been some very frank discussions, particularly with that Mars-Uranus conjunction, there's another part of you that may just want to withdraw somewhat, which would be entirely understandable. But remember, for you personally, the full moon is in the part of your situation which is to do with passion, flair, talent, and the love of life. And if you're doing something where you're not feeling all those energies, do think again. It's rather interesting, Libra, because since Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008, and obviously we've got an interlude at the moment from the 1st of September, world, and the 2nd US, goes back into Capricorn through to the 20th of November for that one final blush. But over those years, a lot to do with your home, emotion, family. But the interesting thing is, over the last month, you've had a brilliant opportunity to use your communicational skills, your networking skills, to raise your profile and be more ambitious and really set your stall high. Have you been able to seize the moment? Because in some ways, as ever, a transformation's required. And if you have found yourself analysing things a lot, and remember, I've got a Libra ascendant at 23 degrees, when we analyse things a lot, it's when we're not so sure. When we take action, it's when things just feel right and we flow. So if you have found yourself a little bit unsure about some of those ambitions or goals, the reason for it might be at some level there's still stuff around the emotional sphere within you, perhaps a degree of thinking things down, of not quite believing in yourself, of not giving yourself enough self-assurance and reassurance. But you know, with this event, things can really start to skyrocket for you amazingly well. So whereas the first one, the first full moon, was really afflicted very challengingly by Neptune, this one, it's just really prime for you. And if you have been working at trying to become more self-confident and assured about what you have to offer, things are going to absolutely explode in a positive way. Mars into 9, that's really exciting, with Jupiter there. Some kind of travel or experimentation or adventure can really follow over the next 6 weeks. But linking to Pluto for the first time in 220 years. Pluto priming up your passion, your flair, your talent, and perhaps your love of romance. And also the Sun about to move into the sign of Leo, joining up with Venus, your ruler, but also Mercury, very social. So things can really start to rattle along, but you could still have a big decision to make on this particular event over the next immediate 2 weeks because of the Sun's opposition to Pluto. So if you're wanting something different from your future, particularly if there is someone that you've been really connecting to of late, that may be the stumbling block. It might not be the attraction thing. It might be the availability or the commitment or feeling that you can plan something. And that may be something you really want. So if you're not getting those signals, the fact that Mars links with Jupiter and Jupiter in turn linking so well with Venus, you may just want to break out, do your own thing, be a bit more of a free spirit, link up with some friends, and you can have a super social time. But ultimately it's that yearning for what is at the root of your life that Pluto was evoking for so long that could still call out to you, even if you are in sparkling company having a fab time. Scorpio, for you this event is very much about let's talk, but let's talk again. But the fact that the talking is connecting with your ruler Pluto on this occasion, in fact on the first full moon it was with Pluto still in what's known as a semi-sextile. That's 30 degrees, which is really positive. But of course Neptune was causing the mischief. This time Neptune's providing its blessing. So what does it mean? I feel that you could have a very important discussion over the next 2 weeks. One that could even be life-changing. Now that may sound a little bit over the top, but with your ruler, your traditional ruler Mars, darting into Gemini, linking back to your modern higher octave ruler of Pluto, the conversation you have could be in some way about a transformation, because the moon's in 3, but Pluto's just in 4, which is home, emotion, family. So if you're having a conversation, for example, about a transformation to where you live, moving altogether, or buying or renting somewhere that may need some regeneration in some ways. If you're someone who's very much into that kind of project, whoa, you really can get stuck in over the next few weeks and manifest something that's really very positive indeed. Because the Sun moving to join up with Mercury, the planet of contracts, of business, marketing, and of course communication, and Venus in the 10th house, if you are interested in property transactions, buying or renting or renovating, what a great time for you to go for it. But just remember, our physical property is our body, and that's where we live. We may live in a house, a home. It could be glamorous, it could be more practical, it may not be quite what we want always, but it's where we reside. But it's what resides inside our emotions that's really important, and that of course is ruled by the moon. So the conversation you have, particularly with the moon connecting with the transformational energies of Pluto, could be with a family member, it could be with someone very, very close, it could be with a counsellor. You could be downloading an app to try to understand what makes you tick. So your inner home, if you like, can just be affected as much in a positive way by this event as exactly where you physically live too. But if you are an ambitious person and you really want to transform a part of your situation, it could be that someone close to you in your family could help you with some kind of investment or a lot of emotional encouragement. And with Mars moving into house 8, very redolent of the energy of your sign, which you understand that you go through periods of great continuity and things are very regular, and then you can have massive colossal change. And of course last week that collision between Mars and Uranus in your 7th house may have seen a big dust up around a relationship, professional or personal. And maybe Mars moving into your 8th house could be your desire to transform or move on. And certainly Mars in 8 is very much about gratification, sometimes around money, long-term finance, sometimes around sex. But the Sun moving to the top of your chart, joining Venus and also Mercury, is going to give you a lot more assurance over the next month. So all of this is a weave that can be weaved in your direction and to your absolute benefit. Sagittarius, one of the things that I feel marks you out above all other zodiac signs, apart from perhaps Aquarius people, is your appreciation of space, freedom, whether it's physical space or whether it's a sense of emotional space. But that has been really conflicted recently in quite a challenging way. And also maybe you've been having to collaborate in a very invested way, financially or emotionally, with the sun being in house 8, long-term change, but that's where we're most all in. The second house where the moon's been, or that first full moon, and this one as well, is about how it feels on an everyday basis, but it can be about everyday money and also your self-worth. And if your self-worth has been taking a bit of a pounding, particularly with Mars being in your 6th house, where you've probably worked your socks off trying to be as productive and industrious and virtuous as possible, only to meet up with Uranus for something to fracture or be very tense or brittle last week, you may be thinking, Patrick, what's all this about? Well, this is where Mars roars in to give you enormous support. In your opposite sign, set your boundary. If you're going to converse your values, the full moon in the 2nd house, Pluto in the 3rd, everyday conversation, you can do so with passion and conviction. But the critical feature of this whole event is the sun making its way into the sign of Leo. And of course, Venus in Leo is linking magnificently on this event to your ruler, Jupiter. So around a relationship situation, if there has been a quarrel or falling out, or you felt very discombobulated, there is the potential to rebuild and find a better understanding of each other's needs. But if you feel that you're done around a job, around a lifestyle approach, around doing so much for everyone else, which seems to have been the theme over the last couple of years, this is a great opportunity over the next month to really give yourself permission to do something much more spontaneously. And being off the cuff is back to you being that version of you that you knew so intimately for such a very long time. But now, with the benefit of Neptune and Saturn in your 4th house, you are much more aware of your inner needs. But a very exciting time awaits on the back of this sensational full moon. So Capricorn, when the sun first moved into Cancer a month ago, and we had the first of the full moons in your sign, that squared up with Neptune. If there were any issues around all sorts of relationships, but particularly people that you are in touch with pretty regularly, if there was some confusion or some uncertainty or mixed signals, that may have really showed up for you a lot. Where have things progressed to now? Because essentially the sun moving through the 7th house is an opportunity to find greater collaboration, greater cooperation, even partnership. But having Mercury and Venus in the 8th house, which is where we go from the discussion to the commitment, is intriguing because, of course, the sun is about to join them. But as it does, it goes into an opposition with Pluto. So even if you've been trying to work out what the exact situation is, particularly I feel in a romantic tie, it could come down to whether your values align or whether you can agree on who contributes and gives and takes what from the relationship. And if something is still out of sync, despite the fact there are a lot of very positive planetary energies around this particular event, if you feel that you're giving away more than you'd be getting back, I think having Pluto in such an influential opposition with the sun could be very telling. So I think it's going to be all in if it's really developing well, or you could be thinking very carefully, particularly with Uranus squaring up to Mercury on this event, about escaping from something that isn't really fulfilling the kind of commitment or meeting all the needs you've got that you've really been trying hard to explain or to interact around over this last 4 weeks. So Aquarius, over the last month, there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of engagement in your situation on some practicalities, maybe to do with your life organisation, maybe to do with your health. Maybe you've had some key appointments in terms of dental care, or perhaps you've even engaged with a pet, because the sun in the 6th house, very much about pets. Aunts and uncles too, believe it or not. But seriously, as we get to the end of the journey of the sun through your 6th house, that's been asking you to find virtue in whatever you do, but also around your physical well-being. But the moons, the 2 moons, have been in very psychological areas. And there's some of that undercurrents you've been experiencing or soaking up energy, because after all, we do have an energetic exchange even with people that we don't personally talk to. If we're in the same room, if we're in a bar, that energy is being exchanged. And if you have felt a lot more tender and not so sure, the great news is that you're about to transform out of this in a much, much more powerful and intact way. But because the moon is so close to Pluto, if there is any issues going on in your situation around your identity, and something does seem to be evolving and you've gained a lot of insight and knowledge, something big could shift in your world through this event and over the next couple of weeks. But also there is the opportunity to have some play and some fun. So if things have felt very sensitive, very bogged down, maybe trying to find that balance around your energy, or your sleep patterns, or your exercise, or your diet, or fulfilling your obligations, you're now moving into a time with that glorious link between Mars and Pluto, but also Venus and Jupiter. Really a glorious time to let go and really engage and connect with other people in a much lighter way after what has been, I feel, quite a testing past month. So Pisces, your 2 ruling planets of Jupiter, traditional, and Neptune, are right at the heart of this event. But if we go back a month ago, when Neptune was squaring up the first of the 2 Capricornian full moons, you may have felt a great sense of uncertainty about what you needed to do for you, the individual. And of course, Saturn has been applying the brake to you over the last 15 months as well. So it has felt that your options have been more limited. Actually, the first full moon was giving you some choices. It just may have seemed a little unclear about which to pursue. Now, I feel one of the areas that can really follow on from this particular event, if you do feel that you're at a bit of a crossroads, it may be around your work that you do want to change something. Because Mars moving into the 4th house, a lot of people work from home these days, but that also is a kind of instinctive thing. It's going from a very quick chatty area, which may have created a lot of extra energy of late, but also at times leaving you feeling completely strung out and exhausted. But Mars moving into the 4th house is just reminding you that how things feel, which being a water sign is really important, is critical. And because the sun then makes its way into its home sign of Leo, it's really pushing you to look at what you need, your practical needs. And the sun's collaborating with Mars, but of course it's clashing with Pluto. So Pluto and this particular full moon are in a very psychological area, to be honest. So the big choices that you're poised to make, whether it's around your life direction, whether it's around developing your ideas, creativity and flair, whether it is around friendships and sociability, or around a love relationship, it is quite psychological. So one of the best ways to deal with this over the next couple of weeks is just think, what works for me practically? It may not sound a very Piscean approach, but remember there is a duality to your sign. Yes, rather like the pop astrology, you can be very mystical, very perceptive, very sentimental. You can also be very escapist, but have a huge capacity for imagination and creativity. But also there's that other side of you that can run ultra cool if you're not so happy. And I feel it's like finding a balance between that side of you that can be very, at times, overwhelmed or submerged by emotion, with the more practical energies that Saturn's asking you to engage with. Find the midpoint between them to do something positive with your situation, Leo energy, but in a way that gives you some kind of tangible outcome. So this is a big full moon, I've got to say, of all the zodiac signs, because the moon right at the end of the 11th house cusp, but connects to Pluto back into the opposition with the sun. So if there is something in your psychological world or to do with your emotional situation that's starving you of energy and self-care, do look to take that much more greater care of yourself over the next month. But also if there's something that you've been in some ways entrapped by, maybe it's a lifestyle choice, maybe it is a friendship, maybe a romantic involvement, that moon connection with Pluto is going to give you a lot of food for thought. But I think Mars coming into the 4th, linking with the sun in 6th, is saying be very self-protective. It's been a real pleasure being with you, sharing this amazing blue moon, this Capricorn blue moon or buck moon. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it thrive and do so now.